The selection process for the Imperial Guard lasted 11 days and involved 43 candidates assessed across 22 parameters by a committee that had, between them, 400 years of protective service experience. Eli Cross finished 43rd, not last in any single category. His scores were distributed across the bottom quartile with a consistency that suggested genuine, comprehensive mediocrity rather than any specific weakness. Reflexes, adequate. Strength, adequate. Combat scores, adequate. Situational awareness, adequate. In a field where the top candidates were extraordinary across the board, adequate meant 43rd out of 43, and a notification that he should return to his posting on Deck 7 by 0800. He was packing his kit when the summons arrived. Not a message through standard channels. A physical document, delivered by a junior officer to his door, bearing the Imperial seal, which Eli had seen exactly twice in his life, both times at significant distance. The document contained 11 words. Report to the Imperial residential level. Immediately. Alone. He reported. He had no idea what was happening. That, he would later understand, was the point. Empress Sorvana was standing at the viewport when he arrived, her back to the door, looking at the star field in the way people look at things they aren't really seeing because they're thinking about something else entirely. She was tall even by Therian standards, her midnight blue skin carrying the faint magnetic shimmer of high-caste lineage, her posture the specific stillness of someone who had spent their entire life being observed and had learned to make stillness into a form of privacy. She did not turn when he entered. "You finished 43rd, she said. "Yes, Your Imperial Highness." "Out of 43. "Yes." "In every category you were adequate. Never excellent, never poor. Precisely, consistently adequate." A pause. "Do you know how difficult that is to achieve?" "I wasn't trying to achieve it," Eli said. "I know," she said. "That's the interesting part." She turned. Her eyes were deep silver, the characteristic Therian coloring, but they held something the official portraits hadn't captured, a quality of attention that felt less like observation and more like calculation, the look of someone solving a problem they hadn't told anyone about. "Sit down, Mr. Cross." He sat. She remained standing. "Every candidate in the top 10 was extensively prepared," she said. "Handlers, briefings, optimized records. 3 of them had been through previous Imperial Guard selections and knew exactly what the committee wanted." She moved to a chair across from him and sat with the precision of someone who made every physical action a deliberate choice. "You had no handler, no briefing beyond the standard packet. You arrived with exactly what you are and performed accordingly." "I performed adequately," Eli said. "Yes." Something moved in her expression that wasn't quite a smile. "Honestly, without performance. Do you understand how rare that is here?" He looked at her, the most powerful individual in the Therian Empire, sitting across from the worst candidate in the selection, at 11 at night. "I'm starting to," he said. "I have had 12 Imperial Guards in 20 years, she said, all selected from the top of their assessments, all extraordinary by documented measurable standards, all assigned to protect me from external threats." A pause. "3 of them were the threat, not physical, political. Information. The Guard has access to my schedule, my meetings, my private communications. Extraordinary people have extraordinary ambitions." Her silver eyes were steady. "I need someone who has nothing to gain from my information because they lack the network to use it. Someone whose primary qualification is that they are exactly what they appear to be." "You're describing that as a qualification," Eli said. "I'm describing it as the qualification," she said. "The one I actually need." He accepted. He wasn't entirely sure why, except that Deck 7 was the alternative, and something in the conversation had produced in him the particular alertness that arrives when a situation is strange enough to be worth paying attention to. His briefing the following morning was conducted by the outgoing guard, a Therian named Cordath, who had served 3 years and was rotating to a diplomatic posting with the expression of someone relieved to be leaving without having done anything wrong. "Her schedule is exact," Cordath said. "She is never late. Her sleep cycle is irregular. She works late and rises early, and those hours are her own, and she does not want them monitored." He handed Eli a tablet. "Current priority concerns: the Velksath trade faction, applying political pressure on mineral rights negotiations, and a council member named Dravath, who has been making inquiries about the Empress's health, inconsistent with medical concern." "What are they consistent with?" Eli asked. Cordath looked at him with the expression of someone who had been waiting for that question. Succession planning, he said. Dravath has been positioning for 3 years. The mineral rights dispute gives him trade faction leverage. If the Empress's health were uncertain, he'd have allies and an opening. Understood, Eli said. Cordath handed over the remaining materials and paused at the door. The Empress will tell you she chose you for your unremarkability. That's true. It's not the complete answer. He paused. Watch her when she thinks no one is paying attention. You'll understand the rest yourself. His first shift began in 4 hours. He spent 3 reading the briefing materials twice, and 1 sitting at the viewport of his new quarters, significantly better than Deck 7, thinking about a woman who had been betrayed 3 times by the best people available and had decided to try something different. The Empress was already awake when he arrived, standing at the viewport again. She did not turn. You read the full briefing, she said. Yes. Twice, I'm told. He processed this. The quarters have sensors. Activity sensors. Standard. A pause. Most candidates sleep before their first shift. You read. She turned. In the indirect light of early morning, her eyes were a different quality, less calculated, more present. What did you conclude? That Dravath is more dangerous than the threat assessment indicates, Eli said. The mineral rights dispute is a mechanism, not a motive. His motive is older. The inquiry about your health is the 3rd in 8 months. The first 2 were classified as routine in the assessment. They weren't routine. How did you determine that? The timing. Each inquiry came within 2 weeks of a closed council session on succession protocol. He's not asking about your health. He's asking about the succession timeline. The Empress was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You finished 43rd. Yes, Eli said. I'm beginning to think the assessment measured the wrong things. The first month was a study in proximity without familiarity. Eli was present. That was the job, a physical constant between the Empress and whatever the day contained. He stood in doorways during meetings, walked 3 steps behind her in corridors, sat in corners of rooms where conversations happened that he was not part of and not meant to be part of. He was furniture that could respond to threats, a variable that everyone who entered her presence had to account for without quite knowing how to account for him. He was also, he realized gradually, being watched. Not by the political operatives or council members. They assessed him the way they assessed all security personnel, discounted him quickly given his file, and moved on. He was watched by Zorvana herself, in the specific way Cordath had indicated, in the moments between things, in the transitions, in the seconds when she thought her attention was unobserved. She was trying to figure out what he was doing when she wasn't looking directly at him. The answer, most of the time, was reading the room. He had developed this on Deck 7, where shifts were long and the work was repetitive, and the only stimulation available was other people. He had learned to track conversations without appearing to map the social architecture of any space, to notice what people did when they thought no one was watching. It was not a trained skill. It was what happened when you spent 4 years in a boring posting with an active mind and nothing else to occupy it. In the Empress's world, it was more useful than his combat scores had ever been. In the second week, he noticed that the aide who scheduled her public appearances was systematically booking her into events where Dravath had a presence. Not obviously. The events were legitimate, the scheduling defensible, the overlaps infrequent enough to look like coincidence. But Eli had been tracking both calendars simultaneously, and the overlap rate was 3 times higher than chance predicted. He flagged it in his weekly security report, not as a conclusion, as a pattern warranting attention. The Empress read it in his presence, which she had begun doing with his submissions. She read this one twice. You're suggesting the aide is compromised, she said. I'm suggesting the scheduling pattern is anomalous, Eli said. What it means is a separate question. What do you think it means? That Dravath has someone inside the scheduling function, creating opportunities for proximity without those opportunities being traceable to him. Each individual instance is defensible. The aggregate is not accidental. Unless you're tracking both calendars simultaneously. Yes. She set the report down. Why were you tracking both? Because the threat assessment identified Dravath as a concern, and the obvious vectors were being monitored. Less obvious ones weren't. He paused. I had time. She looked at him with the silver eyes that he had learned, over 2 weeks, contained more variation than he had initially understood. Something was in them now that hadn't been in the first interview. quieter, less resolved. The previous three guards, she said, what would they have done with this? Depending on their network and ambition, reported through official channels, which Dravath's allies would have contained, or held it, used it as leverage at the appropriate moment. He paused. I don't have a network, and I don't have ambitions that require leverage. So you gave it to me directly. It's your security, he said. It belongs to you. She was quiet for a long moment. The aide will be reassigned, she said, quietly. I'll handle the Dravath connection through channels that don't alert him we've identified the pattern. She picked up the report. This is good work, Mr. Cross. It's just observation, he said. Yes, she said. That's what makes it good work. The threat came in the 6th week. Earlier than Eli had expected, later than Dravath had apparently intended. It arrived not as violence, Dravath was too careful for that, but as information. A document leaked to 3 compact news services simultaneously, purporting to contain medical records showing the Empress had a degenerative neurological condition that would affect her capacity to rule within 18 months. The document was detailed, technically plausible, and completely fabricated. Eli knew it was fabricated because he had spent 6 weeks in closer proximity to the Empress than anyone except her physician, and he had been watching. Her cognition was exceptional, faster and more precise than anyone he had encountered, operating under sustained political pressure without detectable degradation. Whatever the document claimed, it was not consistent with what he had observed. He also knew the leak had been coordinated from within the secondary council. He could not prove the evidentiary chain, but the timing, 2 days after a closed succession discussion, 3 days before a mineral rights vote, carried the same signature he had seen before. The Empress received the news in her residential level, read the summary, set it down. She was still for a moment. Then she looked at Eli, standing in the corner where he was supposed to be unobtrusive. You already know who did this, she said. I know the pattern, he said. I can't prove the connection, but I've been documenting it for 4 weeks. I was waiting to see where it went before bringing it to you. The communications director present looked at Eli with an expression indicating she was revising her assessment of Deck 7 personnel generally. Show me, the Empress said. He showed her everything. The scheduling anomalies, the calendar overlaps, the timing correlations between closed council sessions and external events. 4 weeks of observation assembled into a document that was careful and qualified and did not claim more than the evidence supported. She read it in 20 minutes. He stood and let her read. When she finished, she looked up. The silver eyes held, underneath the calculation, something much older and more tired. The specific exhaustion of someone who had been navigating betrayal for 20 years and had become very good at it without ever becoming comfortable with it. This is enough, she said, not to prosecute, but to move against him through the trade faction. If we separate him from his allies before he can use this document to consolidate them, he loses the leverage, Eli said. The document becomes a liability instead of an asset. Fabricated medical records with no political support behind them is just slander. She was quiet. You've been thinking about the countermove. I've had 6 weeks, he said. I had time. The countermove took 11 days. It required the Empress to do something she had not done in 7 years of rule. Ask for help directly, without the mediation of advisors or intermediaries, from someone she had known for less than 2 months. She asked Eli, not for tactical advice, which he had been providing informally for weeks. She asked him to be present at the meeting where she would separate Dravath from the trade faction, because the meeting required a witness whose presence could not be interpreted as politically motivated. Eli Cross, 43rd out of 43, Deck 7, no network, no ambition, was the only person in her immediate circle who fit that description. They'll underestimate you, she said. That's the point. They already underestimate me, he said. That's been true since the selection. Will it bother you? He thought about it honestly. No. Being underestimated means people say things in front of you they wouldn't say in front of someone they respected. I've been learning things for 6 weeks that I wouldn't have learned if anyone thought I was worth watching. She looked at him with the expression he had been trying to name for 6 weeks and hadn't quite managed. Not the calculated assessment of the first interview, not the exhausted wariness of the document review. Something else. Something that appeared in the moments between things, when she thought she was unobserved. He had been watching her watch him. He had not said so. The meeting, she said. What do you expect? Dravath will use the document as implicit pressure, not overtly, but as a shadow over the negotiation. The faction knows it exists and will assess how you respond. If you respond from weakness, they consolidate behind him. If you respond from strength, they reassess. He paused. The document is fabricated. The strength is real. The meeting is about making sure the faction understands which one matters. And if he escalates? He won't. Not there. He's been building this for 3 years. He won't risk it on an improvised escalation in a room full of witnesses. A pause. After the meeting is a different question. What does he do after? Recalculates, Eli said. He's intelligent. Losing the trade faction doesn't end his position. It ends this particular approach. He'll look for another vector. But that's a problem for after. She was quiet a moment. You think in sequences. Most people think in positions, where they'll end up. You think about what comes next, and then what comes after that. Deck 7, Eli said. Long shifts. I read a lot of history. The pattern that kept appearing was that the people who won weren't usually the most powerful in the room. They were the people who understood the sequence better than everyone else. The silver eyes were doing the expression again, the one he hadn't named yet. The meeting is tomorrow, she said. Get some sleep. The trade faction meeting lasted 4 hours. Eli stood in the corner and was furniture, assessed and discounted within 30 seconds by everyone who entered, which meant that for 4 hours he observed a political negotiation conducted under the implicit shadow of a fabricated document by people who had no idea he had spent 6 weeks mapping every relationship in the room. Dravath sat in the third seat from the Empress's right, maximum visibility to the faction representatives without appearing to claim precedence. 3 years of positioning, expressed in a single chair selection. He was very good at this. What he had not accounted for was Zorvana. She addressed the document directly, which disrupted his mechanism immediately. He had built the pressure to work through indirection, and directness had no surface to push against. She presented, without attribution, the scheduling anomaly data Eli had compiled, framed as a routine security review finding that had prompted an audit of several administrative functions. She did not accuse. She presented information and let the faction representatives draw conclusions. They drew them quickly. Trade faction representatives were not naive. They had aligned with Dravath because he seemed to have leverage, and leverage that had been identified and documented in a formal security review was leverage that had been neutralized. The calculation shifted visibly in the room across 40 minutes, in the posture and eye contact of 11 people deciding whether a position was still worth holding. Dravath understood what was happening by the 90-minute mark. Eli watched him understand it, the specific stillness of someone recalculating in real time, 3 years of positioning becoming a liability in a single afternoon. He did not escalate, as predicted. At the end of the meeting, as the faction representatives filed out, Dravath passed within 3 feet of Eli in the doorway. He stopped. He looked at Eli with the careful attention of someone revising a significant assumption. You were 43rd, Dravath said quietly. Yes, Eli said. Dravath looked at him a moment longer. Then he walked out. That evening, the Empress stood at the viewport again. Starfield, particular stillness, back to the room. Eli reported for the evening shift and stood where he was supposed to stand and waited. He'll find another approach, she said. Yes, but not this one. Rush timelines make more mistakes. We'll see them when they come. She turned from the viewport. In the evening light, with the calculation set aside, she looked closer to what she actually was, a person who had been navigating an extremely difficult position for a very long time and was, in this specific moment, less alone in it than she had been in recent memory. Eli, she said. First time she had used his given name. He noted it. You finished 43rd, she said. Yes. I'm beginning to think the assessment committee should be replaced. The assessment measured the right things for the job it was assessing, he said. It wasn't assessing this job. No, she agreed. It wasn't. She moved to sit, and the space between them was the comfortable kind, built over 6 weeks of proximity and observation, and the particular intimacy of 2 people who had learned to read each other without announcing it. What does this job actually require? She asked. In your assessment. He thought about it. Someone who pays attention to the things that happen when no one is looking. The silver eyes, in the evening light, were doing the expression he had been trying to name for 6 weeks. He let himself try again. Cautious trust, he thought, the kind that had been disappointed enough times to be careful, and had decided, despite that, to be present anyway. Then you're qualified, she said. Adequately, he said. This time she let herself smile.